Did you know that you are made with a purpose? It's true. The fact of the matter is, from the very beginning of time, God created each and every one of us with a purpose. When God created the earth and the waters and put birds in the sky and creeping, crawling things on the earth, God knew that you would exist. And God desired a very specific thing for your life. Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10, that he came so that we might have abundant life. And so that means that we are created for a good life. In fact, at the very beginning, when God creates everything, he creates, the earth, and he says that it is good. And he puts water on the earth, and he says that it is good. He puts the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky and says that it is good. He also says that it's good when he creates all of the animals and puts the fish in the water. All of it is good. And then he creates Adam and Eve, the first two people. He creates man and woman. And he doesn't say that it's good. Instead, he says that it is very good. And he says it's very good because he loves humanity in a very special way. And he creates us because he loves us. God has no greater purpose for our lives than to love us. And so each and every one of us are created for love. And because of that, we are also created so that we may love others. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today, is how we love others. Because this whole semester of Life on the Edge, we've been talking about the sacraments. We started talking about the sacraments of initiation, baptism, the Eucharist, confirmation. And then last time we talked about the sacraments of healing, confession, and anointing of the sick. And there are 7 sacraments, which means we have 2 left to talk about today. And we call those last 2 sacraments the sacraments of service. And the reason we call them that is because the church understands that those last 2 sacraments that we have to talk about are geared towards serving one another. And that we often say that they're at the service of communion. And that's because the sacraments we want to talk about today are matrimony or marriage and holy orders. The sacrament that priests and bishops receive to become priests and bishops. And we call them sacraments of service because they bring people together. They lead with service towards one another so that we may know God in a bigger and better way. And so that's what I want to talk about today, is exactly why you are made and what God's plan is for your life, and how the sacraments of service can help you to achieve that purpose. John chapter 10, verse 10 says that Jesus came so that we may have abundant life. And so that means that anything short of abundant life is not from God, which should tell us that everything we do in our lives, we should be trying to do what God has planned for us. Because if God loves us and desires for us to have abundant life, that means that the life that God has for us is greater than anything that we can figure out for ourselves. And now that doesn't mean that, God doesn't want to go along with what our desires are at some times. For you, maybe you see yourself being a teacher one day, or a police officer, or joining the military, or maybe you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a musician. And those are all incredible things, and you probably have gifts that God has given you so that you may pursue those things. And that's a beautiful and incredible thing. I, for myself, as a young person, for a long time when I was a kid, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. It was hard for me to determine what God wanted for me, and I really didn't know what I wanted for me. And as I got through high school, I had a couple of really outstanding teachers. And as I got even closer to the end of my high school years, I discovered that I really liked teaching people. I liked being the person in class who, when someone was struggling with the work that had been assigned, to be able to help them figure it out and walk them through it in a way that made sense to them. And after high school, I started doing things at church while I was going to college that helped people know more about God. And then through all of that, I discovered that those gifts that God had given me for teaching and that desire that I wanted for people to know who God was, that I could be a youth minister and do that. And so now I get to do that every single day, and it's great. And I'm confident for you that as you continue to get older, you will find those things that God has given you talents for and that you can do great things with. But more than that, we're called to a vocation. And a vocation is much more than just a job that we might have. A vocation is geared towards getting us to heaven. Because, see, there are three types of vocation. The first type is the universal vocation, the vocation that every single one of us has. All of us are called to the vocation of being a saint, the vocation of sainthood, to be in heaven with God for eternity at the end of our lives here on earth. That's all what all of us are heading towards. All of us, our number one goal should be getting to heaven, because that's exactly what we're here on earth for. But the way that each and every one of us is going to do it is going to look a little bit different. And that's where the sacraments of service come in. When we talk about vocations, there are some smaller types of vocations that each one of us will have to decide on at some point in our life. The first one, and the one that you're probably most familiar with, is marriage. Marriage is an incredible sacrament. Matrimony is an incredible sacrament that brings together a man and a woman in a very special relationship with God. Every marriage is between three people, the man, the woman, and God. God has to have a place in every marriage, because ultimately a marriage is at the service of communion, to bring people closer in communion with God, closer in relationship with God. And there's a few ways that every married couple has the opportunity to do that. The most obvious way is for them to get each other closer to God. One of the number one jobs of any mother or husband, any wife or husband, is to get their spouse to heaven. That's the first thing they agree upon when they get married. The second thing is that they have the opportunity to get their children to heaven, to help guide their children in their relationship with God. And that's an incredible and beautiful opportunity. That's why we say that the most essential part of society is the family, the domestic church, that small home church where people can grow in relationship with God together with one another, a mother, a father, and their children. And now, of course, not every married couple has children, but every married couple has the opportunity to still bring others closer to Christ, to exemplify the love that Christ has for us through their relationship and through their love, and allow that love to pour out from their relationship into others. So marriage is an incredible way to help people get to heaven. The other sacrament of service is holy orders, the sacrament that priests and deacons and bishops receive to become those holy men that lead the church. And in the same way that a husband and wife are called to use that sacrament to bring people closer to Christ, priests, deacons, and bishops have a very unique call to do the same. But it looks different. Every priest and deacon and bishop are called and sign up for the task of bringing their church to heaven. Father Island and Deacon George, when they were ordained, they took on the task of bringing the people that they meet here as part of their church family closer to Christ. And what an incredible opportunity. But with both marriage and holy orders, there are great opportunities to do incredible things for God. But there are also great challenges. Every marriage has its challenges. The holy orders, being a deacon or a priest or a bishop, those all have incredible challenges. And it requires us to sacrifice certain things. You can ask anyone that you know that is married, and there are things in their lives that they've had to set aside because they love their husband or their wife. The same thing with priests and bishops and deacons. You can ask any priest, and they will tell you that there are things in their life that they had to set aside in order to pursue that vocation. And now there are a couple of other vocations too that don't have sacraments, but are still incredibly important for the church. And those are sacraments of those are vocations of the single life. And for the single life, every single person has the ability to bring others closer to Christ. Single people have the unique opportunity to love people in a very unique way, in a way that maybe the typical husband or wife that have a family to take care of aren't able to. And so as single people, we have the opportunity to unite people to Christ through just our own witness, and by bringing Christ to them through our actions and through our words. And in a very special type of vocation is the call to religious life. It doesn't require this reception of a sacrament, but there are many men and women who become religious brothers and religious sisters. Oftentimes you might know them as nuns or friars in some cases. But those individuals set aside marriage and pursue a very unique relationship with Christ. Pursue a unique relationship with Christ so that they may bring him to the world in a very unique way. Many times it's through missionary work, serving the most poor people and bringing Christ to them. Or maybe it's in serving in a school or a hospital and bringing Christ to those individuals. It also includes praying for the church in community with other religious brothers and sisters. And so for you, since the very beginning of time, God has had a vocation in mind for you. And the question that all of us have to ask ourselves and have a conversation with God about is, what vocation is that? Is God calling you to marriage? Is God calling you to the single life as a lay person or as a religious brother or sister? Or perhaps as some of you young men might be called to the priesthood. All of those options are beautiful things because all of them bring about a greater world and a greater church. And all of us have the opportunity to use that vocation at the service of God. And so I encourage you, even as a young person, even as someone who is in middle school, to start giving some thought to what vocation you might be called to. Take it to prayer. Invite God to share with you what he might have in mind for you. Because I guarantee you, God has a plan for your life. And whatever that plan is, it is very good. And so trust in God and allow him to show you what direction that he is leading you.